Usually, when we think about grand military strategy, our minds go straight to these like highly cinematic, intense images.
Oh, absolutely. Like those dark war rooms, thick with cigar smoke.
Right. Or, generals pushing little wooden blocks across giant parchment maps, or some brilliant tactician reading Sun Tzu on a hill overlooking a battlefield.
Yeah, we totally expect strategy to be born in places of power, right?
Yeah.
Surrounded by experts, data, complex logistics.
Exactly. It's this assumption that high stakes problems inherently require these um, high level, impossibly complicated solutions. Like, if you're fighting a war, you surely need a massive military treatise to win it.
Right, because big problems obviously need big, complicated answers. I mean, that's just how our brains work.
But today in this deep dive, we are completely throwing out the war room.
We are.
Yeah, we're looking at a strategic landscape that isn't shaped by generals or maps, but by something just completely mundane. A kitchen table, a hungry 10-year-old boy, and a boiling hot bowl of lentils.
It sounds so bizarre when you say it like that, but it's true.
It really is. We're diving into this fascinating folk history titled Rice and Lentils, and we're going to see how the physiological reality of a hot bowl of soup actually mirrors a core flaw in human psychology and military strategy.
It really is a masterclass in shifting your perspective. Like when you strip away the folk elements of this story, you are left with a universal mechanistic truth about how human beings approach obstacles.
And why our first instincts are almost always wrong.
Exactly. Like completely wrong.
So let's get into the mechanics of this. We start with a classic geopolitical powder keg. Two neighboring kingdoms sharing a border, but operating in like entirely different universes.
Yeah, the contrast is intense.
On one side, you have a tyrant, and not just a bad administrator or an incompetent leader, but a truly cruel dictator who runs a regime built entirely on physical violence and fear.
Right. He treats his kingdom not as a society to govern, but as a personal resource to just exploit and brutalize.
It's horrific.
It is. He extracts arbitrary taxes. I mean, there is no system, no logic to it. He just takes what he wants, whenever he wants, which keeps the populace in the state of constant financial terror.
Wow.
And he shows absolutely zero mercy to women and children, using a whip to punish the slightest mistakes. And he operates with this unchecked predatory power, routinely abducting women by force and taking them back to his palace.
So that is the ultimate nightmare state.
Absolutely.
Now, right next door, sharing that border, is a kingdom ruled by a deeply benevolent leader. This is a king who loves his people like his own children and literally cannot bear to see them suffer.
His whole kingdom is built on mutual care.
Right. But this proximity creates an unbearable tension.
Yeah.
The benevolent king is constantly hearing the horrifying stories leaking across the border. The cries of the oppressed people next door are reaching his ears every single day.
And because of his empathetic nature, that proximity is a huge call to action for him. He feels a moral compulsion to intervene.
And he does. He makes a decisive, massive move. He orders his bravest commander to gather an army of thousands of soldiers, cross the border, ignore the countryside, and attack the cruel king's palace directly to capture him.
To just end the suffering immediately.
Exactly. Now, I have to stop here, because if I'm putting myself in the shoes of that benevolent king, I mean, I am doing the exact same thing.
Oh, for sure.
When you are dealing with a tyrant who is actively torturing people, isn't a direct, overwhelming decapitation strike exactly what you're supposed to do? You cut the head off the snake.
It seems like the only moral choice.
Right. Why on earth would you waste time messing around in the countryside when people are actively suffering today?
It is the most intuitive emotional response. When we see a source of massive pain or injustice, or even just a huge problem in our own lives, our instinct is to charge right at the literal center of it.
To just shut it down.
Exactly. On paper, it seems perfectly logical. The king is the problem. Remove the king, solve the problem. Why fight a prolonged, messy war of attrition if you can just execute a surgical strike on the palace?
Send the troops, surround the building, kick the doors in, and we are home by dinner. It's the Hollywood ending.
But that Hollywood ending ignores the brutal reality of military logistics. What that commander did, marching his armies straight past all those border towns, past the countryside, and laying siege to the tyrant's palace, was a catastrophic blunder.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It is a textbook example of what military strategists call a fatal bypass.
Wait, why is it fatal, though? If he has thousands of soldiers and he has successfully surrounded the palace, Hasn't he trapped the dictator inside?
Well, he has trapped the dictator, but he has fundamentally misunderstood the geography of power.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
By marching straight to the political center of the enemy nation, the commander left all of that surrounding territory unsecured. The cruel king isn't just sitting helplessly in his throne room.
Oh, he's got a plan.
Right. He immediately orders his elite inside forces to man the palace walls and prepare for a siege. But then he does something much more dangerous. He sends word to all of his soldiers who are still stationed out in the countryside.
Oh, no. The countryside that the benevolent army just confidently marched right past.
Precisely. Because the invading army didn't secure the perimeter, those enemy soldiers are still out there, fully armed, and free to mobilize. The dictator orders them to converge on the capital.
Wow.
Suddenly, the benevolent army is caught in what is known as a double envelopment.
A double envelopment. So they are essentially the meat in the sandwich.
That's a great way to put it. It's the hammer and the anvil. They are attacking the heavily fortified palace walls, taking heavy fire from the dictator's elite guards on the inside. That's the anvil.
Okay.
But simultaneously, the dictator's national army arrives from the unsecured countryside and surrounds the invading army from the outside. That's the hammer. The besiegers instantly become the besieged.
That is terrifying.
They are trapped between two hostile forces, taking casualties from the front and the rear.
You rush in to be the hero, completely focused on the head of the snake, and you completely fail to realize that the snake's body is currently wrapping around your own neck from behind.
That's exactly what happened, and the resulting battle is an absolute bloodbath. The benevolent army is just crushed under the weight of this tactical error.
I mean, they didn't stand a chance.
No. They suffer massive losses, the lines break, and it turns into a total rout. The surviving forces, including the supposedly brave commander, have to drop their weapons and flee into the wilderness just to survive.
Jeez. That catastrophic failure leads us to the most fascinating pivot in this entire history. We move instantly from a massive, bloody, chaotic geopolitical disaster to a scene that is incredibly quiet and completely domestic.
It's quite the tonal shift.
It really is. The commander is on the run. He's a wanted man in hostile territory, desperate and hiding in a remote, tiny hut on the margins of society.
He has literally gone from the boiling center of conflict to the absolute outer edge.
Right. And inside this hut, the scene is so simple it almost feels out of place. It's just a mother and her 10-year-old son. The boy is starving, begging his mom for food. So the mother brings him a bowl of dulce rice and lentils.
A super common, comforting dish.
Yeah, but it is steaming, boiling hot, straight out of the pot.
And we all know exactly what a starving 10-year-old is going to do when a bowl of hot food is put in front of him.
Oh, he doesn't think. He doesn't strategize. He just takes his hand and plunges it right into the dead center of the bowl.
Of course he does.
And of course, he burns himself badly. He pulls his hand back, crying out to his mother that it's too hot to eat.
It's pure unthinking reflex. The hunger is the problem, the food is the solution, so he goes for the biggest, most appealing, most concentrated part of the meal, which is right in the middle.
This immediately makes me think of the microwave pastry phenomenon.
Oh, the Hot Pocket.
Yes. You take a Hot Pocket out of the microwave or like a fresh slice of deep dish pizza out of the oven. We know it's going to be hot, but we always bite straight into the dead center because that's where the filling is.
It's the prize.
Exactly, it's the prize. And every single time we burn the roof of our mouths, we suffer because we completely ignore the mechanics of how heat actually works.
That is a brilliant way to look at it because the mechanics of a Hot Pocket perfectly mirror what the mother tells her son next.
She gives him advice, right?
Yeah, she doesn't just tell him to wait for it to cool down. She gives him an active strategy. She tells him, don't eat from the middle, eat from the edges.
Eat from the edges.
If we break down your Hot Pocket analogy using basic thermodynamics, the edges of the pastry or the edges of a bowl of lentils have significantly more surface area exposed to the cooler ambient air.
Oh, I see.
The heat dissipates much faster on the perimeter. The center of the bowl is insulated by all the food surrounding it, trapping the heat and keeping it at a boiling temperature.
That makes perfect physical sense.
By telling him to eat from the edges, she is telling him to attack the problem where the friction, in this case the heat, is at its absolute lowest.
So the boy listens. He takes a bite from the perimeter where the food is spread thinner and cooler, and he can eat it comfortably. He works his way around the bowl, and suddenly the meal isn't a painful obstacle anymore.
It's manageable.
Exactly. And sitting in the corner of this hut, hiding in the shadows, the military commander is watching this entire exchange, This mundane interaction about a bowl of soup triggers a massive perspective-shifting epiphany.
Which is wild, right?
Totally wild.
Yeah.
He's a highly trained military tactician, but it's this mother's basic grasp of thermodynamics
Yeah.
that cracks the code of his own failure.
He realizes he is the little boy. He was hungry for justice. He saw the prize, the dictator's palace, and he plunged his entire army right into the boiling hot center of the country.
Yeah, got completely burned.
Exactly. The heavily fortified palace, packed with elite guards and insulated by the surrounding countryside, was the center of the bowl. It was where the enemy's power was most concentrated and insulated. By attacking it directly, his army got destroyed.
But here's where I need to push back on this epiphany. The commander has this realization. He escapes back to his benevolent king, confesses his massive blunder, and proposes a new plan. He says they need to fight a war of attrition. They need to spend months slowly taking over the dictator's border villages one by one, eating from the edges.
Yeah, the new strategy.
But if I'm the king listening to this, I'm thinking, wait a minute. If you take a month to slowly capture tiny farming villages on the border, aren't you just giving a ruthless dictator 30 days of advance warning?
It seems like that, yeah.
Doesn't a slow strategy just give him time to build taller walls, hire more mercenaries, and prepare to crush you again? How does slowing down actually win a war?
That is the exact logical trap that makes people rush the center in the first place. You assume that time only benefits the enemy.
Well, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. What the commander realized is a concept we now call resource asymmetry.
Resource asymmetry. Explain how that works in practice.
Okay, so when you attack a border village, you aren't just taking an arbitrary piece of land, you are fundamentally altering the mathematical balance of power.
Okay, I'm tracking.
Every time the benevolent army captures a village, they are cutting off a supply line that feeds the dictator's palace. They are capturing grain, weapons, and horses. But more importantly, they are neutralizing or absorbing the very countryside soldiers that the dictator used to spring the double envelopment the first time around.
Oh, wow. I see. So it's a double swing.
Exactly.
If the dictator loses 100 soldiers and $10,000 in tax revenue from that village, the benevolent king gains those resources. It's a net swing of 200 soldiers and $20,000 in power.
Precisely. You are starving the center to feed the edge. By the time you spend a month systematically taking the perimeter, the dictator hasn't been building taller walls. He's been slowly suffocating.
Because he have nothing left.
Right. He has no external army left to summon, no food coming in from the farms, no tax revenue to pay his mercenaries. You have effectively cooled the dish down.
It's a centripetal strategy. You are moving from the outside in, and the center gets weaker with every step you take.
And this isn't just a military concept. You see this exact same dynamic in the business world all the time.
Really? Like where?
Think about how disruptive startups take down massive, entrenched corporate monopolies. A smart startup doesn't launch a product that directly competes with the monopoly's flagship, multi-billion-dollar core product.
Because that's rushing the palace.
That's how you get crushed by an army of corporate lawyers and massive marketing budgets.
Right, the monopoly is the boiling hot center.
Exactly. Instead, the startup attacks the edges. They find a tiny, underserved niche market that the monopoly ignores because the profit margins are too small.
Oh, so that niche market is the border village.
You got it. The startup dominates that small market, gains resources, builds better technology, and then moves to the next slightly larger market. They eat from the edges until one day the monopoly wakes up completely surrounded.
Their supply of new customers is cut off, and their core business is suddenly obsolete. That makes perfect sense. And that is exactly how the resolution of this history plays out. The commander's new strategy works flawlessly. By securing the edges first, moving methodically inward over the course of a month, they systematically neutralize the dictator's power.
They starve him out.
By the time they reach the palace, the heat is completely gone. There is no double envelopment. They capture the cruel dictator, sentence him to life in prison, and the benevolent king's mission is accomplished. Not through brute force, but through patience and the mechanics of a bowl of lentils.
It is a stunning validation of how the foundational rules of physics, like heat dissipation and human nature, scale upwards. The mechanics of eating a bowl of soup are conceptually identical to the logistics of a geopolitical military campaign.
I find that fascinating, but it brings up a huge psychological hurdle.
What's that?
If the math of eating from the edges is so undeniable, if it works in physics, in business, and in war, why do we hate doing it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Why are we so deeply prone to ignoring the edges in our own lives? If you look at human behavior, whether someone is trying to tackle a massive personal goal, fix a broken relationship, or just execute a huge project at work, we almost always try to dive straight into the boiling hot center. We know it burns, yet we do it anyway. Why?
It's a fantastic question, and it comes down to a fundamental quirk in human psychology,
Yeah.
which is our absolute intolerance for the tension of an unresolved problem.
So impatience.
It's deeper than just impatience, though. It's about cognitive load. When we have a massive problem hanging over our heads, it occupies an enormous amount of mental bandwidth.
Like it's just always running in the background.
Exactly. Just like the benevolent king couldn't sleep knowing people were suffering, or the little boy couldn't focus on anything but his hunger, we want the psychological discomfort to end immediately.
That makes a lot of sense.
So our brains instinctively prioritize actions that promise the fastest total resolution, regardless of how risky they actually are.
We want the silver bullet. We want the one big action that slays the dragon today so we can stop thinking about it tomorrow.
Exactly. And that leads to the second major psychological trap, which is the illusion of efficiency.
The illusion of efficiency.
Taking border villages one by one takes an entire month. It requires immense discipline, delayed gratification, and living with the fact that the dictator is still technically on the throne for 30 more days.
Which feels incredibly slow and inefficient.
Right. Rushing the palace, by contrast, feels incredibly fast, decisive, and heroic. But here's the brutal truth that people ignore. A fast failure is infinitely less efficient than a slow victory.
Wow. A fast failure is infinitely less efficient than a slow victory? That is so universally applicable. It actually makes me think of how people approach fitness or New Year's resolutions.
That's a great example. How so?
Imagine someone decides they want to get in shape after like 5 years of not working out.
Yeah.
The edges of that problem would be going for a 20-minute walk every day or just drinking more water.
Very low stakes.
Right. But it's boring. It's slow, and it doesn't feel like you are drastically changing your life.
It doesn't satisfy that emotional urge for an immediate transformation.
Right. So instead, they rush the center, they go straight to the gym, try to lift heavy weights for 2 hours, completely burn themselves out, or worse, injure their back.
And then they're out of commission.
Exactly. Now they can't work out for 2 months. They rushed the center, got burned, and ultimately their fast solution set them back significantly further than the slow, methodical approach would have.
The exact same mechanism applies to knowledge work, too.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. When you are assigned a massive, intimidating project at your job, the instinct is to immediately try and solve the core, most complex issue on day one. You stare at a blank screen, trying to write the brilliant conclusion before you've even done the research.
Oh, I've definitely done that.
We all have. And you freeze. You get overwhelmed by the sheer number of variables you don't control yet, just like the commander was overwhelmed by the hidden soldiers in the countryside.
Because the core of the problem is too hot. It has too many dependencies.
Precisely. But if you start at the edges, if you spend day one just organizing your files, drafting a rough outline, or sending out the preliminary emails to gather data, you are doing two things.
Okay, what are they?
First, you're building psychological momentum with easy wins. Second, and more importantly, you are systematically stripping away the variables. You are isolating the core problem.
So you're clearing the battlefield.
Exactly. By the time you actually have to tackle the hardest part of the project, you have the resources, the context, and the clarity to handle it without getting burned.
You've cooled the dish down. Yeah. You've mapped out the geography of the problem. That is a profound shift in how we ought to view the obstacles in front of us. Problems aren't just solid brick walls.
No, they're not.
They have a specific geography. They have a dense, highly insulated center, and they have fragile, exposed edges. And the smartest, most strategic thing you can possibly do before launching an attack is to locate those edges.
The fable completely shatters our hierarchy of knowledge. We assume that grand strategy belongs only to the generals and the CEOs.
Right, the guys in the war room.
But the truth is, the wisdom required to navigate our most complex, high-stakes challenges is often hiding in plain sight, embedded in the most ordinary moments of our lives.
Which leaves us with a critical question to examine in our own lives. Think about the most overwhelming, intensely stressful, boiling hot challenge you're facing right now. The problem that is keeping you up at night.
The one you just want to go away.
Exactly. Are you constantly getting burned and feeling defeated because the problem is truly impossible to solve? Or are you getting burned simply because you haven't figured out where your edges are yet?
It's a powerful distinction. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to charge headfirst into the fire, but to have the discipline to step back, look at the bowl, and find the cooler perimeter.
We don't always need a war room to find our best strategies. Sometimes we just need to pay much closer attention to the mundane reality right in front of us. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for those massive lessons in the smallest moments.